It's time for you to look inward and begin asking yourself the big questions. Who are you? And what do you want?
Alright guys, hey, welcome back to another episode of the Combo channel. Super excited to have our guest today. So our guest today is Pearce. After the introduction, I'll let him say his last name. I don't want to butcher it. But he's a former 75th Army Ranger who served as an infantryman in the 1st Ranger Battalion. After his successful stint in the 75th, he created the Ranger Blueprint to help aspiring SOF operators. So the blueprint covers the mindset needed for selection, how to pass selection, how to physically prepare for selection, and if you're struggling with whether to pursue a career in SOF, how to deal with those thoughts, and just kind of much more that once you do get the blueprint, you'll discover those things as well. So Pearce emphasizes the importance of mental preparation, which is crucial to push through when your mind and body want to give up. So just kind of keep tuning in, guys, to hear more about his journey and his strategies for success. But hey, Pearce, man, welcome to the podcast, man, and let us know how to say your last name.
No worries, Cucchissi. But
Cucchissi.
It's good to be here.
Got you, brother. I always like to start off with just a couple warmer questions. I call it "How would you respond?" Excuse me. I got 4. So first one's gonna be, what is the meaning of life for you?
Ooh, going deep quick.
Yep.
Good question. My definition of the meaning of life changes every day, but I truly think part of it is to find the meaning of life, which essentially encompasses the idea that while we're here on this earth, it is essentially a school, right? So the idea that we should be continually pursuing growth, whatever that means for you at the time. The meaning of life is continuing to grow and learn, and then to bring people up behind you to where you once were. Right, so you're helping everybody else along the way. That's essentially what I'm doing now with the blueprint as well. Fits into that, and everything else.
Fondest memory in Ranger Regiment?
Honestly, probably all the shenanigans with the boys. Right, some of the deepest connections I've ever made were in Ranger Regiment. Just a ton of funny stories from being up in the middle of the night after walking 30 miles through the woods and doing a bunch of practice missions, or hopping off a helicopter on a deployment and hanging out with the guys afterwards. Most of the fondest memories have to do with the people.
This one's another little tricky one. Does death scare you?
No, the actual death does not. What scares me is not having lived. What scares me is being on my deathbed and having regretted parts of my life.
And this last one is going to be, if you had to write a book about yourself, what would it be called and what would it be about?
Should have written a list. I guess it would be about kind of all the, again, on bringing other people up, would be all the mistakes made, all the lessons learned, all of the observations that I saw. It would probably be something around like a life's guide to intention. Doing everything with a specific purpose and a specific goal, and actually putting all of your energy into it, so you're not just a leaf floating through the wind of life.
Well, that's it for the warmer questions, man. Those were intense. But kind of going now into chronological order. Let's start with your early life, of course. So just start with when and where you were born, and if you had any siblings, how many siblings did you grow up with?
So I was born in New York City. I got one sibling, younger brother. He's currently a pilot in the Marine Corps. Just us two.
And just because, your initial influencers are going to be your mother and father, they're the ones that are kind of molding and taking care of you. How big of a role, if any, did they play in, shaping you to the man you are today?
I mean, definitely into shaping me into the man I am 100%, right? How could they not? It's essentially a part of growing up with two people who are ahead of you in life, who teach you everything you can, that you spend a lot of time around. In terms of how I got here, it's tough to say, because the endeavors that I've pursued have been very, very different from what my parents pursued. However, I do believe that some of the pieces that they tried to instill had a lot to do with it, whether that was putting in effort for something, training hard, working hard, being entrepreneurial in some way, discipline, accountability, things like those. I'm sure had a big effect. And then beyond that, you're probably looking at like coaches in sports would have been another one, right? Was the path exactly the same that I took? Obviously not, but a lot of the things that you learn through those experiences translate into later life.
And getting a bit into like just your teenage years, were you doing any sports or doing anything to perform well academically?
Yes, I performed fine academically. I wasn't too interested in what we had been taught in school, but I made sure I got things done. I fought it a little bit. I was probably more intellectually curious outside of the topics taught in school. I could go on a whole podcast about the school system and being a young man. In terms of sports, in high school, I played water polo and rugby, which were two pretty physically and mentally demanding sports. And I would assume that had a lot to do with my success in the military later on.
Once you do graduate, you of course have to figure out that question of, am I going to go to college, or am I going to take a year off and just do work, or am I going to look into trade jobs? Kind of what was your thought process as you were graduating high school?
So at that point, I didn't consider the military as much, simply because I didn't know much about special operations, right? So the idea of conventional military never really enticed me. I always, in my mind, the cool guys were always kind of outlaws, not following the rules, doing things different from everybody else. And your conventional military didn't seem like that. So I was lucky that I had the opportunity to go to college and play rugby at Loyola University in Los Angeles. And so that gave me this window of time to kind of figure out what I wanted to do, right? So some of the people that are listening are probably like, hey, I know exactly what I want to do at 18. And I would say, great, go into the military. But this gave me a window of time and something to do, right? I didn't know what else exactly I would do after high school. Looking back on it, there was a lot of other options. The option I chose was college. And so it was during college that I started to learn about what special operations units were, right, for the first time. And then it's when that really clicked.
That kind of segments well into, what was that pivotal moment where you decided that you are going to join the military, and that was your path, but not just joining, but wanting to join an elite unit?
So from the get-go, the second I got interested in it, I knew that the elite unit was the only way to go. I never considered anything else but special operations. Now, there's differences here. There's the point where I started to consider it seriously, and then there's the point where I actually made the switch to completely put everything I had in my mind into being successful in that path. That took a while. It took a while because I was resisting everything that I had known. So the military stuff skipped a generation. Nobody in my parents' generation went into the military. I didn't know anybody in special operations. I didn't know anybody from my school. I didn't know anybody from my town. I didn't know anybody from my college. Nobody I knew pursued this path. So it almost seemed like this mythical thing, and it was scary, right? Am I going to go do this? Am I going to leave all my friends, my girlfriend, my family? Right? I'm signing a contract for, I was a big, I loved freedom, the idea of being free. And now I'm signing a contract that I can't get out of. So it took me a while to actually make the decision. And one of the reasons why the blueprint exists was because I considered myself very lucky. There was no information out there on this stuff. There was a couple of books. There was Dick Couch's book where he kind of follows a RASP and SFAS class and a BUDS class. There was a couple other sort of memoirs written by special operators. And luckily, I just hit some of them up and asked them if they'd talk to me. A couple of them said yes. And that was incredibly, incredibly valuable. But that wasn't out there, right? And now I'm assuming that would be a lot harder to do, considering social media is a big thing and they probably get thousands of questions on it all the time. So
Yeah.
what I created was a way that guys could learn from people who have actually done it instead of just, stories in the book. So it was after I spoke to those guys and I ruminated on it for a while, the yes and the no. And I basically realized that once again, looking back on my life on my deathbed, I would regret not doing it my whole life. And so that's what helped me make the decision.
Yeah, it's crazy you say that because I had a similar experience before joining the National Guard. It was an active duty, so it wasn't as terrifying, but I did have the thoughts of, man, like I am still going to be gone for basic AIT, OSUT. Especially when I went, they extended the OSUT from 14 weeks to 22 weeks, and I had those questions too of like, man, do I want to leave? Is the military for me? Yada yada yada. And doing research like you did, I finally made that. I made that decision to go, and it was for sure one of the best decisions of my life. But once you meet with the recruiter, how kind of did your recruiting experience go?
So this is something that I talk about in the course as well a lot. My recruiting experience went like this. So I did not go. I put a lot of pride in doing the research myself. So I didn't go to the recruiter asking them what I should do. I went to the recruiter telling them what I wanted to do. And what I learned was most recruiters, when it comes to special operations, and if there's a recruiter out there, it's not your fault, right? But they know absolutely nothing. Most of them some of them didn't even know what Ranger Regiment was. It was that bad, right? Remember that the recruiters have an agenda, right? So some of them that didn't really know anything about special operations, they were like, oh, you should do this 18X program. We can't really get option 40 contracts. And I didn't really believe that. It took me 5 recruiters. By the 5th recruiter, this was in Inglewood, California. I can't remember his name. I walked into the office. I found the guy who ran the office, the top guy. I said, I'm physically and mentally prepared. I can pass all of the tests. I want an 11 X-ray, option 40 contract, and as soon as you have it, I'm ready to sign. He just looked at me. He said, okay, and I walked out. Called me about 2 weeks later. That's the approach that I suggest everybody go into this with, right? Because the recruiter is basically a used car salesman.
Yeah.
So do you want to just show up at a car lot not knowing what you want, and the recruiter thinks, hey, I can get the best, the salesman says I can get the best commission on this or whatever it is, right? Don't leave anything up to them. And again, it's not the recruiter's fault. They just simply have not been there. So why would you trust somebody that hasn't done what you have done? Rangers don't become recruiters. Never heard of it happen. They don't get put on recruiting duty. That's not something that's part of the special operations path. They might be a Ranger recruiter, but that's only within the active duty circle. So if you're going to a recruiting office, it's different. So that was my experience with recruiting.
Okay. So eventually you do get the option 40 contract, you get your leave date. Leading up to that, what kind of preparation were you doing to get ready for RASP? Did it simulate a lot of what you teach now, or you were still kind of figuring that out?
Yeah, no, it simulates a lot of, I was using a lot of like neurological type training, very specifically making sure that you're teaching the nervous system how to do the actions over and over again. I had to completely relearn how to run because I was getting shin splints and I couldn't pass the 5-mile times. So I basically retaught myself how to run efficiently. What else? I was doing what I'll call challenge workouts, which are like really super long, intense workouts specifically for the mind, right? Like everybody knows the workout Murph. It's a CrossFit workout. And so I would do like a triple Murph that would take, 2.5, 3 hours to complete. So obviously a lot of it I learned while I was there and afterwards too, but I used a lot of those training principles. I wasn't necessarily, the best athlete out there.
Okay. And during the moments where, you didn't want to train, maybe you were sick, dealing with shin splints, whatever the case may be, how were you pushing through that? and keeping the goal at mind.
So you're kind of talking through like motivation, right? Like how do you keep motivation going? So remember that I had a reason for wanting to do this that was deeper than any lack in motivation that I had in the present moment. So motivation comes and goes. It always will. What I try to tell people is do never expect yourself to be motivated to train. If you do that, then you'll be able to keep yourself disciplined. The people who only train when they're motivated will never make it. I promise you, if you only train when you're motivated, you have a 0% chance of making it in special operations. Right? So instead, I utilized discipline, which was just setting a course and a path and doing it and forcing myself to do it, even when I didn't want to. As far as you mentioned shin splints as well, that's a different thing. That's an injury. If you keep training on shin splints, you'll get stress fractures and then you can't train. There's nothing discipline can do about that. But the way I applied it was I relearned I put the discipline into learning. The discipline into learning how to run again. The discipline into learning specific drills that would keep me from getting those shin splints and kind of starting over, which wasn't easy. So starting over, learning how to run. Yeah, those are some of the tools and techniques that are incredibly important.
Got it. And I want to go straight to RAS, and then we'll go from there. Not that basic in AIT, like I was kind of telling you offline. Like it's not that it's not important. That's still a part of your story, and I'm sure you had a great experience. But I'm sure more people are are going to be more interested in RASP, how you dealt with RASP, etc. So RASP it's split into 2 phases. And you start with phase 1, and you start with phase 2, as you know. Just kind of speaking a little bit for the viewers and just the research that I've done on it. So we'll start with phase 1, just getting into how you perform and just your overall experience in phase 1. So going into RASP, what was, like you were kind of talking about earlier, what was your why you had for yourself that you used as a reminder to not quit?
So the why is multiple layers deep, and this is what I stress that guys go and do. It had a lot of functions, right? It was the regret, it was the wanting to push myself to be the optimal type of fighter, the optimal type of man to test myself in the most difficult and stressful and dangerous situations that life in the military had to offer. I wanted to feel like I had earned my place in life, like by serving, right? I thought it was kind of important as a man to be able to test yourself in the ultimate way. I wanted to be around people that felt like they were like me. I wanted to enjoy what I was doing. And it goes deeper than that too. But it was important to have that why, because that's what keeps you going when all the thoughts or feelings of quitting start to come up when you're going through something like RASP Phase 1, which is pretty much just a smoke fest.
Yeah. And are you still 100%? Like no injuries, sickness, nothing like that once you class up to RASP?
I wasn't sick. Injuries, I didn't have too many major injuries. My low back wasn't ideal from a rugby injury prior to that. And then, you're working out a ton, and the body could have always been better. My mobility wasn't ideal at that point, but I was generally okay. Yeah.
Now, phase 1, correct me if I'm wrong, of course, but in this phase, you're getting evaluated on land navigation. You're doing a forced ruck march, a 5-mile run, first responder test, and then you're getting tested out also on Ranger knowledge, correct?
Yep, Ranger knowledge, Ranger history, psych evaluation, land nav's a big one.
Okay, so out of those events mentioned, which one did you not perform as well as you wanted to?
Well, I would say all of them, right? Because you always want to strive for something better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I did well on all of them. There was none where I walked away saying, "Oh, I'm much better." I knew where I was in PT standings, and I did fine there. I crushed the land nav. The other tests are really pass or fail, and that was it. That's what's interesting.
What was your runtime?
Most people think about you have to pass all these things, and it's the easy part. You should already be prepared for all of that stuff.
Yeah. Do you remember your runtime by any chance?
No, I'm assuming somewhere around 35 minutes for a 5-mile.
Okay, not too bad. Now, when it came to ruck marching and running, what was your strategy when it came to that? Was it be fast and efficient? Like, for example, running, some people sprint out the gate and then they burn out, where others start slow and then they build up speed. As for ruck marching, some people like to stride it out, others like to really just run like half of it. What was kind of your approach to that?
So I told people to use the same form in rucking as you do in running. That part is really important. For rucking, I would usually run until I felt like I needed a break, right? That might be like a mile, 2 miles, something like that. And then, you just don't want to totally burn yourself out. So I would basically, you run as long as you can, take a quick breather, keep running, quick breather, keep running, all the way till the end. The ruck, actually passing the ruck march is easy. You can walk it. Getting a good time on the ruck march is a different story. And like being able to keep up with the ungraded rucks, right? Sometimes you just go out for a training one, like 6 miles, and those can be brutal. The instructors are fresh and they're just running. So you need to make sure that you've got a good running form, even with a ruck on. For the actual 5-mile runs, so I was never a good runner. I'll tell you my strategy, but I don't necessarily recommend it. I would always start out fast because I felt good, and I kind of just tried to maintain that pace all the way through the end and sort of hold on. Guys who are really good runners, like did cross country in high school or college or anything like that, they tended to keep more of a steady pace. So that's probably a little bit of a better strategy. But in reality, again, if you can run efficiently, then you should be able to pass the time. And again, it's just bragging points at that point, right? If you finish the run in a 37:30 or a 32, you don't get any special candy.
Yeah, it's insane, man. Like I had a buddy who was in my OSA class. He graduated RASP like a couple months ago, and he ran a 27 or a 28-minute 5-mile. Insane. I mean, and this guy is skinny, man. Like he's so skinny. You would look at him, you would not think like this guy's a Ranger. It's just so insane, you know what I mean? And I'm sure that's something we can cover later on with the whole size thing. You have to be this big, big guy in special operations. Well, you don't. He's a good example of that.
Well, remember,
probably gonna have him on my pocket.
He'll most likely adapt, right? Because when you're going through RASP, you're not an active Ranger. You're just a guy, and they're testing you to see if they can mold you into what they want. What I typically say is the best Rangers are more like it's a tactical athlete. So you can think of it more like a CrossFit athlete. Okay, so not some guy that's running a 27-minute 5-mile, like good for him, but he's probably not strong enough. When I showed up to Ranger Battalion on my first day, my team leader was like 6'6" and 260 pounds. And the first thing we did was buddy carries up and down the field, right? And he's wearing kit. So most likely your buddy that's crazy skinny and running a 27-minute 5-mile is going to have trouble with that. So for the guys out there, don't feel like, hey, I have to run a 27-minute 5-mile. That guy, when he gets to Ranger Battalion, will have to focus on getting strong. So everybody will have something that they focus. The really strong guys usually have to focus on their endurance. And everybody sort of finds this medium in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. During phase 1, did you have any hiccups, or you passed all the gated events on the first try?
Passed all the gated events first try.
Okay. And during that, during as you're going through phase 1, like what caused, from what you were saying, what were some of the things that were really causing people to get recycled, and then things that were causing guys to quit?
So the recycled stuff would usually just be injuries, failing land nav, potentially failing a PT test. So that's pretty straightforward. And then the quitting was the interesting one, because the quitting is 100% mental, right? If you pass the pass or fail events, they can't really get rid of you. That's what's crazy to me about people quitting. You don't have to be some superhero. So the guys that would form up next to me were 100% better athletes than I was, and they seemed, on the outside at least, even more confident, and both guys quit one day. and start to see the way people talk to themselves. What gets me, and I understand it, but what's tough now is all the questions that I get every day. They're almost all focused on physical training. Physical training is, I don't know exactly what percentage of this game, but it's a small percentage. The mental side is everything. The reason why people quit is mental, not physical. They start talking to themselves in negative ways. Their why isn't strong enough. They start believing the things that are going on in their head. They don't know how to bring their nervous system down to a place where their body can be reset and calm. They don't know how to change their posture. They don't know how to process thoughts. They don't know how to stay disciplined with things. They don't know how they do in difficult environments. All of these, this is what made people quit. And that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for Superman. They're looking for the guy that won't quit, because that's what's difficult to teach. I think you can teach it. That's what I'm trying to do, right? With the blueprint is teach it. But why? It's a lot harder and it's a lot less straightforward, right? So the goal of any special operations selection is to take the guy that is the baseline physically fit and smart. You know, he's got his ASVAB score, and he's got his PT test, and the rest of it is basically, will he not quit? Because that guy's not going to quit on a mission, and that's the only thing that matters. What your 5-mile time is on a mission, completely irrelevant.
That's true. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I was watching Andy Stump, and he was speaking on that. He was like, a lot of average people, like just, average, he was saying, could survive a day of like, he was speaking on buds, but just speak on any selection, could survive one day of selection. It's the day after day, the 2 months of constant beating, sleep deprivation, lack of food that gets people. And it goes back to the whole mentality thing of, having your why in check and being able to break those mental barriers. So yeah, I mean, it completely makes sense with what you're talking about.
Totally correct. Totally correct.
So talk to us about cold range. I know for most guys it's a blur because everything's just like super fast. It's coming at you blazing. But from what you remember, what were the antics that Cadre were using to get guys to quit?
So there's just there's the typical ones, which I don't need to go into too detail. Just running a ton, push-ups, buddy carrying, crawling through the mud and the trenches with the snakes and blah, 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 whatever. The interesting ones are the ones that mess with your mind more. So I'm sure you wouldn't guess how many guys quit because of eating. Like they would take something that was supposed to be a break, right? You think that, we get to eat next. I'm going to get to chill for 20 minutes. And they would turn it into an absolute shit show. And guys would quit because of the eating. Like, for example, then the cadre forcing you to eat like a almost frozen part of an MRE, or like choke down, and it has to be done in 30 seconds, or choke down like the salt packets and the coffee grounds and things like that. And looking back on that, it seems kind of stupid, but it makes sense as a mental game, right? If this guy can't handle just choking down some not great tasting food quickly, how can you handle combat? Right? Is it the same thing? But you have to be able to accept everything. You have to be able to not be so frail that you have to have your 10 minutes or whatever they were going to give you to eat. So they just take that luxury away. And so that was one thing that was a little bit different that I didn't expect, but it was crazy to me how many guys quit during that. Then you also have the bag dumps are a big one, which is basically they make you take your ruck and dump it out, like literally just shake it out until everything falls out, not like take things out, and then shove everything back in over and over again. And guys basically couldn't handle the control over their own things. So I don't know what it was. They're so OCD about the stuff that's in their bag, or just getting angry about it and frustrated, and that would take them out. I'm trying to think of what else there was. Being out in like the cold and the rain, or thinking you're going to get like a 30-minute nap and they throw the flashbang at you within like 3 minutes of you trying to take a nap. Stuff like that. Other than that, it was pretty standard of what you can imagine from smoke sessions.
Yeah, most definitely. I've heard a lot of crazy stories, especially from guys that I've met and interviewed on this podcast.
Yeah.
Pretty insane. But moving into phase 2, where it's Ranger skills training. How well were you able to pick up on tactics and the battle drills that cadre were teaching you?
It was pretty simple. We didn't really go into battle drills too deeply, so you kind of understand it from OSA, and then you're just kind of learning how Ranger Regiment does it. And then it was, shooting and demolitions and things like that. And that wasn't too difficult to pick up. The reality is nothing is too difficult as long as you just listen and perform. The difference between special operations and the rest is not that they do some secret things. It's that they can do the basics incredibly well under incredibly high amounts of stress. So they just do the same thing. They stress you out, see if you can perform very basic tasks. Stress you out, see if you can perform very basic tasks. That's really the only difference. The biggest difference between what you do in OSA and what you do in RASP is there's a ton more pressure. They jack your heart rate up. They make you suffer more, and you have to perform the same thing. But phase 2 was cool. I mean, phase 2, you get to start learning from things. The cadre aren't always trying to kill you. You start to get a little bit of a window of what it's like.
Yeah, and I agree. One thing I've learned, honestly, one thing I've learned is the importance of staying calm under pressure when your heart rate's jacked up, whatever the case may be, and just staying calm and thinking through the problem. Like I was watching the RASP, like the old one, little documentary they had, and the guys were doing a shoot, move, communicate. I'm up, he sees me, I'm down, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I think he was the last. I can't remember, but I think he was the last one because the cadre was killing all the other guys. Like, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead, right? And he was I think he was like a saw gunner or something like that, and he had wasted all his ammo. And the cadre's like, what happened? You know what I mean? So he was so stressed out that he forgot how much, he forgot to remember how much ammo he had and how to properly, burst fire, things like that. So I completely understand with performing under pressure, calming down, even though the cadre may be screaming, it's chaos, kind of like, almost like headphones, noise cancellation. You cancel the noise out and you perform. Easier said than done, of course, you know what I mean? But once you can master that, things are kind of endless for you. But 100%. With marksmanship training, marksmanship training, is it possible, like, if you're not shooting expert or not zeroing your rifle properly, like, you can get dropped or recycled for that?
You can really only get dropped or recycled for any sort of violations, like safety violations. I don't know if that's changed in the past couple of years. I could go back and ask my buddies that are RASP cadre. But when I went through, there wasn't really tests on this stuff. They weren't necessarily trying to make you perfect shooters during the small window of time you have at RASP. They were trying to make sure that you knew how to shoot the way the Ranger Regiment does, so that when you showed up to your unit, they could kind of train you and not train you completely from scratch. So, I mean, if you master the basics with shooting, it's relatively easy. Or if you just learn how to zero your rifle properly, again, it's relatively easy. Shooting is easy. Think about it this way, right? Shooting is incredibly easy. You have to point the gun at the target and you have to pull the trigger without the gun moving. Anybody should be able to do that. But again, when the pressure's high and you're stressed out and your mechanics are off and you lose kind of discipline within shooting, that's when issues happen. So the shooting in RASP is relatively basic. They teach you what you need to know, and this way you have a platform to go off and join your battalion. The thing that they take incredibly seriously is safety. So you can get kicked out of regiment if you've been there for, let's say you were in Ranger Battalion for 8 years, you're a platoon sergeant, right? If you have a negligent discharge on a range, gone that day, done. So
do you get it, like, if that does happen? Not to cut you off, but if that does happen, do you get an NTR?
No. It depends on where you are. So if, let's say you're a platoon sergeant, right? You're an E7 and that happens to you and they like you, you'll be able to come back. If you're a brand new guy, might not be able.
And just for the audience, when I say NTR, that just kind of goes for, like, I believe, like, any selection, honestly. Never to return, just basically meaning, like, you just never can go back. Unfortunately, you can never try out again. You gotta just look at other soft opportunities, unfortunately, at that point. But anyway, so once you finally complete both phases, what's your thoughts now? What are your thoughts? What are your emotions going into graduation day?
So graduation day, look, I had visualized myself being there. I had expected to get to graduation. So it wasn't this big, it was like, oh, nice, RASP is over, next step. But
yeah.
That was it. I knew that what was coming next wasn't going to be easy. So it was literally just the first step. The second you show up to a Ranger Battalion is maybe harder than RASP. In some ways, the pressure is on. It's no longer a game.
100%, because you're on that trial period, that 1 year or however long it is, trial period of, trying to get slotted for Ranger School. If you don't get your Ranger School tab in a certain amount of time, you're RFS. I was wondering too, with RFS, can you still go back and apply like months, a year later, or how does that work?
I don't know
if
the exact rule, but I've never seen anyone come back.
Man, that would be such a that's such a bummer, man. Like, if you got RFS, because you can still, like, if you got RFS, you can still wear the patch, right? Or no?
No. Well, you would have to have deployed if you had, and then then I guess you could. If you had deployed, then it stays. But if you leave the unit, the patch on your left arm changes to your next unit.
Because I could have swore I've seen I swear I've seen guys who, like, had the patch but didn't have Ranger tab or anything. But anyways, that's kind of off topic. But so once you do arrive to 1st Ranger Battalion and going into, like, you have your first formation, you're going to find out what platoon, what squad you're in, you're going to be in, which I'm sure you found out before, but you're kind of getting used to all that. I can only imagine, like you said, the pressure's on, you have excitement, nervousness, eagerness. Are those kind of the emotions you're feeling?
Yeah, definitely. When I first showed up, my platoon was on block leave from a deployment. So I had a week or two before everybody actually came back. There were a couple guys that were back at the company who basically took, it was 4 of us that were new and just crushed us for 2 weeks. You have to learn everything. You have to learn all this new knowledge. You have to set up all your gear. You have to do PT. It was a rough couple weeks.
I saw a video of a guy, he was describing the process, I think it was on Sandbox or something like that. He was describing the process to get to regiment, all the way from OSA to RAS and etc. He mentioned that his alarm for many years in regiment was set to 4:45 a.m. Is that typically the time that y'all had that wake up time was?
Usually have a 6 o'clock work time. So whatever time you want to get up, maybe you live farther away from base. Some guys would get there pretty early before work, but it's not every day. Because remember that a lot of times we train at night, so then the work schedule gets pushed later in the day. There was never on a normal day where you're not doing anything crazy, or at night before, you usually get in there at 6, and then it completely varies. I mean, sometimes you show up at work at 1 in the afternoon.
Okay. And just if you can pick from an example of anything that you remember from one day in regiment, from start to finish, what are you doing in that day?
I'll give you 2. One example is like you're at the base, you're kind of staying there, right? So you get there, you do PT, you get some breakfast, and then you might learn, right? You might all do some sort of training where you're learning something new, or you might like work on gear, right? With a ton of gear, or like plan for some sort of training. You might go out and then actually do some training like dry fire, battle drills, demo training, kind of dry and things like that. And then, you've got admin tasks that you've got to do, potentially work out again after work. You get off at a normal time, whatever, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then on a day where you're at the range, it's basically show up, PT, go to the range, and you're at a shooting range all day, potentially all night, and then come back. That's it.
Got you. And what was trying to think of a way to word it. What was that moment where you had, I guess, an appreciation and admiration, or just this like, wow, like I'm actually here. Like I'm in a special operations. Was it when you got access to certain weaponry, equipment, the training facility that y'all have? And kind of what was it that stood out to you that made you have that like, wow, like this is special operations. This is awesome.
I think it took a real training mission where you're loading up with all the guys. They're taking it really seriously. It's in the middle of the night and you're about to go do something like completely coordinated. And, maybe it's like an airfield. One of the first ones I did, I think, was airfield seizure, so 100 guys are jumping out of a plane at the exact same time, in the middle of probably a time like that where we're like, whoa, okay, this is different. We finally got somewhere.
Man, it's I was talking to I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast, but his name's Gonzalez, but we call him Gonzo. They call him Gonzo. He was in Ranger Bat, and he was saying like it sucked sometimes when you would do the jumps and then you're under nods, and it's like so hard to like find your guys that y'all have to have some kind of like, techniques with the IR strobe lights or something like that to find, because everybody looks the same almost. You're like, dude, you're like, is this you? And like, it's just like, did you have that kind of experience when you got down, you know what I mean? And from the airplane, parachute landed, all that stuff?
Yeah, it can be tough to tell who's who. You usually have a rally point, right? So everybody's job is to get themselves to their own specific rally point where you meet up with your team, because guys can be like all over the place after a jump. But yeah, when you're under nods, everybody pretty much looks the same, especially when you're new. Once you've been there for a while, you kind of know what your guys look like under nods. But when you're brand new, you no clue who anyone is.
Yeah, that's dude. How do you are y'all's nods way better? I know you don't know what how the conventional side is, but are y'all's nods so good to where it focuses in really well? The nods?
Yeah, they focus in pretty good. They're definitely better than the conventional.
Dude, it is. Oh man, I'll tell you what, it's a nightmare. Like having those, it gets to the point sometimes where I'm like, I'd rather just have these things off. Like, I can see better even in pitch dark with these freaking nods. It's just like, and then it's with one eye, compared to y'all's where it's like two. So much easier for the audience. There's another good reason to join special operations. Better equipment. Better.
The equipment is definitely better. The equipment and the funding is for sure better. But look, night vision is night vision. Like even people that, everybody's like, oh, the quad tubes, right? That's the big thing. That's the highest level of nods. It's still night vision.
Yeah.
It's not like you're seeing with your eyes during the day. You could easily trip over your own foot walking down the street. It's you have to get used to it.
Yeah. And as a new guy, did you struggle to get caught up to speed, or did you blend in and suffice pretty well?
I did well compared to other new guys, but it always felt like I was struggling to get up to speed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And a big thing that you hear that we kind of mentioned briefly was it's easy to make it to regiment, but it's harder to stay. Mm-hmm. And have a good, not just stay, but also like have a good career too. Why is that in your opinion?
So about half the guys who showed up with me at 1st Ranger Battalion got RFS within the first year. I think a lot of that is, one, there's always some that slip through the cracks at RASP that shouldn't actually be there. That's one reality. Two, when you're in basic training, when you're in a course like RASP, you're in a container, right? You're essentially in a vacuum. There's no normal life outside of that. So it's hard to deviate from the plan. When you're in Ranger Regiment, you are in normal life. You can go out on the weekends and get, wasted drunk with your buddies if you want to. You have normal life. You've got your car. You've got, you can have your girlfriend. You can have whatever. And so there's way more temptations out there that can keep you off of discipline. And that's what gets guys eventually, kicked out, or they can't handle it, or they realize that it's just not for me. I don't necessarily want to be here. This isn't, they don't really fit in with the mentality, for example. That's typically what I saw.
Okay. Now, even though Ranger School is a requirement for Rangers, it isn't something that's given, but it's of course earned, where, you have to score on your PT test, be a good dude, whatever their criteria is for Ranger Regiment. How soon did you go to Ranger School?
I went after about 2 months, which a lot of the other guys didn't like because some of them had waited almost 2 years. It was partially because I had good PT scores, but to be honest, a lot of it was just luck, just the timing. There happened to be this extra spot, and
that's crazy.
I beat a couple other guys on a PT test, and they wanted to send me, so I got lucky.
And of course, knowing how important it is to pass the school, to stay in regiment, and then also have the opportunity to move into a leadership role, how did you compartmentalize those thoughts of, man, what if I get recycled? What if I get injured? Or what if I get dropped?
I thought about that every day, because your whole career is riding on the line with Ranger School in terms of failing. And then if you recycle, Ranger School just sucks. I couldn't imagine doing more of it. Funny story, I actually almost got kicked out of Ranger School. There was a guy on land nav. I couldn't see him. It was in the dark. You don't have night vision, and there was no moon. And he fell. And he fell into, it was like a 6-foot dry creek bed. He fell off a cliff, like a 6-foot cliff. I say cliff, it's not huge, and the noises he was making were like he was seriously injured. And so you're not allowed to talk during land nav. But I kind of whispered, like, you okay? You need to get an instructor. Now, there's instructors hiding in the woods. So unfortunately, there was an instructor right near me. And they essentially failed me from land nav the first day. And I had to go and see the CO, and I had to explain to him the situation, and he kind of believed me, kind of didn't, but he gave me another shot, so I passed the land nav the next day.
Wow.
But, that was interesting, Just want to make sure the guy didn't have, like, a punctured lungs from breaking his ribs.
Yeah, for sure, man. And then kind of still tagging along to that, with those thoughts of recycle, injury, etc., when you're also experiencing, going through each phase, you're experiencing lack of sleep, you're performing battle drills, just all those factors like that. What mentally keeps you locked in and keeps you going?
What mentally keeps you locked in is fear. Fear of not making it. Now, if your why, if your why isn't strong enough, then that doesn't matter. You'll just give up. If your why is strong enough, then you essentially keep going out of fear. The fear produces adrenaline, and that adrenaline helps you to perform, right? Yeah. So I may not have felt fear the way most people would think, but if you drill down deep into my psyche, the fear of failing Ranger School and not being able to go back to Ranger Regiment was deep.
100%. And I bet for most guys, it's like that. But when it comes to leadership, not everyone is going to be comfortable with it to lead. And also, not everyone in reality is suitable to lead. When you do get a chance to be in a leadership role, were you pretty confident or kind of nervous? Like, man, how am I going to execute this plan? How am I going to motivate and lead my guys? Like, kind of walk me through that.
So I was relatively confident in leadership. I had been like captain of sports teams in high school. I got a chance to do leadership in OSUT, but you're in a completely different scenario. And now you have to lead a bunch of guys when they're broken, beat down, haven't eaten, haven't slept. And that's a totally different game of leadership, dealing with people that are essentially not in an optimal state. So, but the reality is it doesn't matter. You just execute. You just execute your leadership style in the way that makes the most sense. And that's what I did. And for the guys that don't feel like they're natural leaders, well, you must become one. All special operators are leaders, right? Because the what makes up special operations, like the term operator, basically literally means that you can go out and execute a mission on your own and come back, right? So you're able to operate on your own. You can operate the entire cycle and function of what it means to accomplish a mission. You have to be able to lead to do that. You're not just like a cog in a wheel. So the leadership part was just, you just do it, man, and you figure it out along the way. And you try to be a good teammate and a good leader, and you listen to your guys and you speak up, and you show confidence. The rest is up to you and your team.
Yeah. Did you go straight through, or did you recycle any?
I did go straight through.
Okay, that's good, man. I know that's like a huge blessing and a little bit of luck as well when it comes to Ranger School for sure. Yeah. But once you graduate, you get back to your team. What's the vibe now? You know, I mean, you finally got your tab. You don't feel as much, I'm assuming, intense pressure, you know, or being in survival mode, kind of. Like, what's the vibe kind of now with the guys?
So you're treated a little bit differently, at least. You're treated kind of like a member of the team. The difference for me was that I went to Ranger School at 2 months, and they were guys that had been there for almost 2 years. And so I was essentially a less experienced Ranger than the guys without Ranger tabs. So I couldn't come back and be like, oh, I'm a hot shot, right? I had to be humble once again. I was still learning from untabbed Rangers as a tabbed Ranger, simply because I had only 2 months of training before I went to Ranger School. And then I was also expected to perform better and be more mature and be more of a leader because I had been to Ranger School. Remember, Ranger School doesn't teach you to be a special operations Ranger. Ranger School is a mental and leadership test.
So kind of getting now into the decision to get out. Now, before that, like I was kind of mentioning to you offline, you know, I was going to talk about deployments and just kind of the mindset on deployments, but, you know, I wanted to kind of do a separate episode on that. So just kind of throwing that out there. Yeah. But anyways, what was the deciding factor to wanting to get out of the Army rather than stay in, continue to move up the ranks of regiment, or maybe even trying out for Regimental Reconnaissance Company or Delta?
Yeah, so I joined the military as an experience, not for a career. I knew that in the beginning. And the experience I wanted was that typical, like, tip of the spear kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I got myself to a place where I essentially was the literal tip of the spear. Not me, but my position. My position was the first guy in the building, right? That's what I was supposed to do. After that, you start getting, you're forced to get promoted in Ranger Regiment. You basically get promoted, or you're not good enough to get promoted and you leave. So as you start getting promoted, you start getting pulled away from that tip of the spear. You start coming to more like managing the team. And again, so that would have been less of the experience. The next logical step would have been to go to Delta or CAG, whatever you guys want to call it, which I had considered. I had worked with them for 2 of the deployments, and it was a difficult decision. I will be honest, and I miss a lot of that stuff every day. The reality was, at the time, I put more of an emphasis on kind of freedom from military life. And I knew that if I wasn't going to stay for a 20-year career, it was kind of like, well, I might as well get the rest of my life started now. I know what that other side is like. The other thing was, I didn't want to lose these other relationships that I knew were going to be lifelong. I was away from my family a ton, friends. I was beat up. Like, my body felt beat up too. It's a tough decision. I think about it all the time. If I would have gone to that next level. But the reality is guys go there and then they get out and they're still in the same situation. You still kind of start at square one. So there are a lot of different factors. I think I sort of missed a lot of the freedom of normal life. And then when I'm in normal life, I miss the cool stuff that we did in the military. So there's always a grass is greener part of it.
Yeah. And during the first year, from what you can remember, being a civilian, what was going through your mind as to what's next?
So I didn't really know what I would do next. But when I got out, right after that, the whole COVID shenanigans happened. So that really forced me to figure out what was next. I took a job with a tech company that was doing some like augmented reality training that had military applications. And then I went into starting my own business in the human performance sector.
Yeah, I think I did see that. I think it's on your other page, right? On not the Ranger Blueprint, but
some of it's on there. I don't do too much with the social media in that space right now.
Got it. So let's get into the Ranger Blueprint now. And then we'll kind of do the little Q&A, pull questions from what I've seen on your page. But where did that idea and inspiration to create this come from?
So I just started getting messages all the time basically on Instagram from guys. And I started to realize, well, man, if I don't want to just keep answering the same questions over and over again, maybe I'll put it in something. And I didn't do that for a while. I also was mentoring some local guys. So some guys in the area in California would go and I'd take them through workouts. I'd teach them some of the stuff that we put in the blueprint now. A lot of them were doing really, really well in regiment. And then again, it was difficult to get people out and people going to gyms, and it was kind of this COVID time. So at first it was a way for me to just collect all of my thoughts and put it in one. And so I could have more of a real conversation. If you look at the Ranger Blueprint page on Instagram right now, you'd be surprised on how many guys ask me, hey, do you have any tips? Think about how broad of a question that is for such a deep and involved topic that can change the entire trajectory of your life. So instead of answering that, now I can say, hey, go to this course that is like 6-7 hours of videos and interviews and books and documents and things to try and things to train. And there's a community with a bunch of other guys like you that you can meet up with and ask questions. And we do coaching. And then once you've gone through all that, come back to me and ask a real question that can actually help you. So essentially what it does is it's an accelerator. You're somebody who's exploring this. You get to go through all of my knowledge, like as if you spent an entire week with me, right, and downloaded everything. And then you'll have much more targeted questions that we can go through. And that's kind of what helps people the most. So the Ranger Blueprint was there to put out something that I wish that I had, and also to just make it easier on people when they have questions. Go doing the research themselves, because I know there's not a lot of them.
What's your vision for the blueprint?
For the
long term, of course.
My vision for the blueprint is that every single graduate from a RASP class has utilized the techniques directly from the blueprint.
Do you ever think you'll make an appearance at a RASP graduation and speak?
I have never thought about that. I would.
That'd be a good idea, right?
I would if somebody asked me, but I haven't. To speak, there's more than enough people there that can speak, and they've been spoken to by the cadre, and all the active guys are there. I really think that what I can offer more is beforehand, because nobody's going to be able to speak to those guys better than the cadre and the instructors that are currently active.
Yeah.
Right. But those guys don't have the time to speak to civilians. And so that's the space that I think I can fill.
Let's kind of now get into a couple questions.
Hit me.
Little Q&A that I pulled from your page. So I'm just going to ask. Once you answer, I'm just going to move on to the next one. First one, how to choose between Green Beret or Ranger Regiment?
Easy. You have to decide which mission set you like better. Okay, they're very distinct. Rangers do direct action missions. That means kicking in doors, killing and capturing bad guys. That's literally it. Everything around the Ranger Regiment is designed for that. If you want to do that, there's no better place in all of special operations. If you like the idea of unconventional warfare, foreign internal defense, training other special operations, that's what Green Berets do. So they operate in a small team. They go to another country. They train foreign special operations units, and then they advise them on missions, which means they kind of quarterback the mission, right, and help them with planning. But their job is training other militaries. So whichever one of those you think you'd like to do more, choose it that way. All of this other bullshit, which unit people think is better than the other, get that out of your head and simply focus on what are your daily actions going to be like? What are you going to train for? And which do you feel like fits your personality more?
Now, in terms of preparation for selection, CrossFit style workouts versus your guided workouts to prep.
Okay, so a lot of people ask me about that too. One in the blueprint is systems for training. What that means is I teach you how to create a program for yourself. It would be detrimental to both of us if somebody gave you and I the same workout program because we're in different spaces. So that's essentially like JV. Varsity is you can create a workout program for yourself based on your current situation physically, your current lifestyle. Are you working? Are you going to school? Are you in the military? You need to know how to train that way. So yes, there are programs inside the blueprint, but the most important piece is that you know how to train, you know how to monitor your recovery. Those are kind of the big points. What was the other part of your question? There was another piece in there.
It was just that. It was, hey, should I do a CrossFit style or should I
let me
use your
style? So if you cannot max a PT test, you need to throw all of the other training out the window. Right? That's the only goal. If you cannot pass the PT test, then all of your other training doesn't matter. So what I tell guys is stop with all of the other things for a period of time. Get yourself to a place where you can max a PT test and then start adding that stuff back in and keep retesting yourself on the fitness test. And make sure that you can maintain those numbers while you get stronger or you're doing your CrossFit or anything like that.
Next one, managing having a family while in special operations.
Difficult, more difficult than other jobs, but it's also doable. I would say about half of the guys had families, and you just have to make sure that your spouse is on board with your mission. You need to make sure that your house is in order, your finances, your whole life, your kids' lives, everything like that. The most important thing is that your spouse is in line with what you're doing and believes in what you're doing and is there to support you. But it's 100% doable. I mean, a lot of the time it's a normal life. You go to work, you come home, you have your weekends off. Totally doable. The difficult times are training trips and deployments.
And I know this one may be another common one too. How old is too old to join special operations?
Whatever the Army says is too old. Which I think is 35 or something like that. Doesn't matter.
I guess I meant in a sense of like people are like, I'll see on your the questions, right? They'll be like, I'm 33 or I'm 27. Am I too old to join?
Absolutely
that kind of thing.
Absolutely not. This is like a cliche saying, but age is just a number, right? I've seen 21-year-olds who are more physically beat up than 32-year-olds. So go look at a guy like, a friend of mine, Rudy Reyes, was a Marine.
Oh yeah, guy's a beast.
Okay, he's an absolute animal, and I think he's 50. That is a guy that most 21-year-olds should be looking up to physically, right? He is physically decades younger than the average 50-year-old American, right? So don't worry about your age. Worry about your physical and mental ability and stage at the time.
Yeah, it's crazy you say that because there's another great example. He was on the, gosh, what is it? Oh my gosh, I forgot the podcast. Like they have a lot of Rangers on there. It's hold on, let me see if I can think of it real quick. If not, I'll just continue on with the example. Mentors for military. That's what it is. Mentors for military. Short, they have it MIL. Mentors for MIL. Yeah, check that out. But anyways, there's this guy they had on. I forgot his name. I think it was Max or something like that. He's 40 years old. He went through RASP at 40 years old and graduated. When he graduated, he was like 41 or so. But still, he's in his 40s, and this guy's still in regiment.
Yeah,
so there's another prime example of
perfect.
If you want it, this is your dream. You absolutely want to go for this. Do not use age as an excuse.
Yep.
So I just wanted to add on to that. But last one, no, two more actually. The benefit, and shout out to the episode you just did. I'll link that episode in the description on your channel, the Ranger Blueprint, where you just interviewed a recent RAS graduate. I believe it was in your program. I'm not too sure, but you interviewed him, and you were saying like the things that some guys never might know or should know, which is the benefit of being in special operations. Can you kind of go back onto what you were kind of telling him?
So I don't remember exactly what I was telling him, but I'll go into the benefits. So most people will never understand how this can change their entire life. For example, a lot of guys are worried about making small investments in themselves, like buying a piece of equipment or a program or spending a tiny bit extra money on, good quality food or whatever it is. Okay, so most people are focused on the micro. Here's what being in special operations does for you. I will give you an example. This is not to brag. This is just reality. Last week, I attended a course at Harvard Business School. I am not a guy that would ever get into Harvard, go for free without being in special operations. Okay? So it was at the executive business school and with all these other people, and now I have these connections within business that it's been a week or two, but who knows where that will take me. In terms of you're basically in this big fraternity now. You want to get an interview at basically anywhere, it won't keep you there, but it'll get you in the door simply by your past. People want to talk to you. People want to help you give you jobs. They want to help give your wife jobs. In California, my kids go to college for free. I go to college for free. I have health care for life. Right? So these are benefits that people don't think about. Not to mention that I'm proud of an experience that I did, and I have these incredible relationships with guys that will last the rest of my life. But the actual monetary return can be enormous, and nobody really thinks about that. So I hope guys start to think about that now. Not only to mention what type of guy that you will become, what you will learn while you were there. So I wish more people would think about that when they start nickeling and diming their preparation or anything else that has to do with it.
Got it. Yeah, that's 100%, dude. One more, and then we'll conclude the episode from there. This one I don't think wasn't really pulled from your questions. You may have gotten a question like this. I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
But it's also in response to, but this one's in regards to the woke culture and kind of the lack of recruiting numbers due to lack of trust in the government, the wars we're fighting, and as far as the Nicholas Irving thing, a question was brought up to him would you would you join again? And his son was brought up, and he was like, absolutely not. He wouldn't let his son join, and he feels that some of what he did had no impact at all. What are kind of your thoughts to that?
I don't want to speak on Nick Irving because I don't know what he said in that interview, but I would disagree. Did a lot of the things that I did in the military have no impact on me? Yeah, absolutely. But did a lot of the things have a massive impact on me? 100%. The other thing, from my view, not having listened to his interview, Nick's entire platform was built off of his military experience. Could he have done better or done something different? Or who knows? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But it would be difficult to say otherwise. As I mentioned with my previous and the ROI that I got, return on investment, I would 100% say that somebody should do it. If you don't believe in the government or believe in the war, like, here's the reality. I joined the military for myself, personal development, my own experience. You can't get those experiences anywhere else. Who really cares about what the government is doing? Right? Are you always going to agree with the president? No, but you're not working with the president every day. Is the military doing some crazy woke type of things? Don't need to go into that. Yeah, they are. Are there all these things that, aren't amazing when you're there? But I still think it's a worthwhile experience. And also, who am I to tell somebody else that it is or isn't? All I have is my own experience. All I can do is share that experience and allow them to make that decision. I wouldn't push anyone either way. Right? I wouldn't say do it. I wouldn't say not do it. I would say go deeper on why or why not you want to do it. And then you'll be able to make the decision for yourself.
Yeah. And I brought up the nickel server thing because it's interesting how every veteran, whether soft or not, had their perspective on it. And of course, like, he meant well, and what he was saying in the interview was on Vlad TV. And just being a man of war, having, killed people, got, losing people, of course some people have disagreements on whether they want people or their own family to join just because of what they experience. So it's always interesting to get different veterans' perspective, especially special operation guys' perspective on, should I join, especially in this day and age where a lot of things are just more out there and a lot of people are so confused on what should I do, what to do, kind of thing. But anyways, that was the question in essence. But that's pretty much it, man. That pretty much caps it off. But before we go, I think I wanted to kind of do different, mainly with just maybe the veterans that I bring on here or actively serving is if you don't mind, man, just with the mental health message to the veterans who struggle with transitioning, deal with PTSD, and maybe think of suicide, whatever the case may be. If you could just kind of give your wisdom and encouragement or whatever it is you want to say before we end the episode.
Yeah, my wisdom is just reach out to guys that you see that are doing pretty well afterwards. They can feel free to reach out to me. I'm connected with a lot of different veterans organizations that help guys heal from PTSD and brain injury and things like that. I do the same. We're taking a group of special operations veterans out to Idaho in a couple of months to do different types of kind of healing modalities that the VA won't do. Yeah, that's it. Reach out. And here's the thing with mental health. Mental health is the same as physical health. In order to get physically more fit and healthy, we have to do work to cause our body to adapt in the way that we want it to. Mental health has to be the same, right? A lot of people like taking pills. It would be like almost, I want to get stronger and I'm taking steroids, but I'm not working out. That's not going to do anything for you. You have to create the stimulus. So go ahead and learn from guys who have done it, what you need to do to get yourself healthier and better, and put in the work just like it's training again. And that's kind of the next phase. So you can reach out to me. I can reach out to other guys that you find on social media. There are veterans organizations all over the place that help with this. There are more free resources than you could possibly imagine. And most of it is just that you don't want to put in the work.
Got it, man. Yeah, I really appreciate you kind of sharing that. But that concludes the episode, guys, man. Really, really appreciate to all the people who continue to support me. For those who listen to this video, please continue to like, share, and subscribe, so that way I can continue to interview these awesome people. And more importantly, these stories can get shared to someone out there in the world, and someone can benefit. But that's it. Any final words? Any final thoughts, Pearce?
No, All good, man. Love to have more people in the Ranger Blueprint. Easy to find us online and Instagram and all that. So that's it from me.
For sure. I'll leave the link in the description below, guys, so you can check out his Instagram and also as well the episode with the recent RASP graduate. But other than that, that's it, guys. And